Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of We're the New Adults. I'm your boy TJ Williams. I'm going to be your host for this podcast. Thank y'all once again for tuning to another episode of my podcast, We're the New Adults. Once again, this is just a podcast that I came up with the idea about close to a year now. I came up with this idea of starting my own podcast, putting myself back out there, and this is what this process has been, putting myself out there, motivating people to let them know that you're not the only one that goes through things, and some of the things that you go through, other people go through as well. Us becoming new adults, trying the best way we can to be the best new adults possible. And yeah, so this episode, we're going to take a dive. We're going to kind of do a few back steps, and we're going to take a dive into our childhood. Ugh. Nobody likes Nobody likes to talk about the C word. Nobody likes to talk about the C word, but I feel like there is no way you can be the best new adult possible without dealing with your childhood. There may be parts of your childhood that you really don't like to talk about, or parts of your childhood that you may not even remember, or even realize that those parts of your childhood are affecting you today as an adult. This episode is to kind of talk about that and yeah, get into it. So let's get into it. Episode 17, Dissecting Your Childhood. So all of us have had the privilege of having a family, whether it is a good family, a bad family, or however you would describe your family. It's your family. You can't change that. As much as sometimes we like to disown our disown certain sides of our family or disown certain members of our family, you can't change that they have somewhat of an impact on who you are. It's up to you to realize that, to grow out of that, if you like to grow out of it. The parts of our childhood that we choose not to talk about are latched onto us, whether we want to admit it or not. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's latching on to us and the older we get, the less we talk about it, or the more we try to compress it, the more it's going to come out and project in other ways, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your friendships. It will come out in some ways. And I think a lot of the times it takes us putting a mirror in front of our face, and putting a mirror in front of our face is, a lot of us don't like to do it. I don't like to do it, because it's like, ooh, it's like a reality check for us, and to let us know that we're not so perfect, or these things that we're doing are maybe not so healthy. The things that we thought that were so good, and who we are, and everything that we are grounded in, may not be as good, and may not be as beneficial to our life as we think. And that is a hard process to go through, of having to dissect everything that you've been through in your life, just so that you can realize, how am I the way that I am today? Why am I doing some of the things that I am doing today? And it's so crazy to think that the past has so much to do with the present, but it does. Growing up, oh my lord, growing up in small town Natchitoches, Louisiana. So I really have never really just talked about my childhood, and it's so crazy. I got asked in an interview one day, "Oh, sum up your childhood for me in," I think they said, a paragraph, and I'm like, and when you think about it, it's like I really, it's really hard to sum up parts of your life within a few sentences. So that just made me get to thinking. I'm like, dang, like let's really talk about my childhood. So me growing up, so I was premature. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have watched the episode with me and my mom. I think that's like episode 2 or 3. Me and her are talking about just me being brought into this world already with so much chaos. I was premature. I was supposed to be born on July 14th. I ended up coming out June 6th, and my mom was just not ready to have me at all. There ended up being complications within my birth with me and my mom, and it was a lot. It was a lot. But with that being said, I feel like from the moment I came into this world, my family looked at me as they need to protect me. From the moment I came in, just because of me being premature, and barely making it alive, out of birth. And my family, they have stayed with that. They have stick with the protecting, okay? But yeah, as I can remember, just growing up, I was never a bad child. I was always happy. I was always happy, even to this day. Like I was always happy. I can remember my mom telling me that there was this lady who used to take care of me in the what you would call the projects or whatever. With them taking care of me when my mom was at work, and my mom would tell me, like, she would come pick me up, and people around the neighborhood in the projects would be like, "Oh, we know your son. Like, oh my God, like he's such a happy baby." And that was the start of it. We think about how even in your child days, similar characteristics or similar habits that you have today. And that's one of them. Like, to this day, I'm always speaking to everybody. My mom has always raised me to treat everybody how I want to be treated, no matter where they come from, who they are, or what they look like. And I've always grounded myself with that. But to know that it's always been kind of inside me, even since a toddler. That's amazing. It's mind blowing. But grew up, of course, in the church. My mom, my grandparents, my sister, everybody, church. It always leads back to the church for me. Everything that I have is because of my relationship with God, and I thank my family so much for grounding that within me. So growing up for me, I was at Bible study, I was at Sunday school, I was at church, I was at choir rehearsal, dance practice, drill team practice, youth trips. I did it all, and at the time I didn't understand. I didn't really understand, like, why do I have to be at everything? Like, I want to go outside and play with my friends. You making me go to Bible study. And I didn't understand at the time, but my mom was doing the groundwork so that I could be able to have a relationship with God on my own. You kind of have to force your child to go. You gotta, boy, come on here. Just so they can get a little bit of the word in them. And it's so crazy. I didn't realize how much spiritual understanding I had until I got older. And I started thinking back, like, oh, the Bible studies, the Sunday schools, forcing me to get up and go to church. All of that, even though I didn't want to at the time, is still grounded within me. And because of that, it has led me to have the relationship with God that I have today. So with that being said, with me having church being everything in my life, and giving my everything to church, it just ended up being so needed, and you never realize how much, you need God until you need him, until you really need him. But yeah, so church being everything, and so as far as school goes, I went to a private school. I went to Northwestern State University elementary lab. I went to middle lab. This is a private school, majority Caucasian. A lot of people would be like, "Oh, you go to that white school. You go to that white school." It's like, okay, like, and I'm not gonna lie, like, with me going to the private school in elementary school and middle school, it was a time where I was insecure, and like I felt like low key, I wanted to be at the public schools, just because of people picking on me for being at the white school. Not that there was any issues with the school that I was at. I ended up having the best years of my life at my elementary school and middle school. I met some amazing people that I still know and talk to this day. But it's just because for me, I always had one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. So it was like they never intertwined, but because I would be spending the first half of my day with this group of people and the second half of my day with this other group of people, it would lead to me kind of code switching. And it wasn't that I wanted to. It wasn't that I wanted to code switch, but in my earlier years of going to grade school and everything, I remember I used to get picked on for talking proper. Or, and not to mention, whenever I was younger, my voice was super light, super, super light. So not only was I getting picked on for talking proper, but I was told I have a voice like a girl, and all this other stuff. So it just led to me being insecure, and having to talk like the group of people that I was hanging with outside of school, like trying to switch up my slang and switch up, basically who I am just to fit into the crowd of my other group of friends, and that was it was very hard, and not even during the time, just because I felt like that was what I was supposed to do. To avoid getting picked on, to avoid getting talked about, I feel like that was what I was supposed to do. Okay, you can act this way at school, but whenever you get at, whether it's Boys and Girls Club, your after school, activities in the neighborhood, you have to let that go. You have to let that part of you go, and, that's not necessarily the case, but it was hard growing up. It really was hard growing up, especially trying to balance both of those worlds, but I did it. I did a great job at it, and I was very involved in the community. I played sports since, oh my lord, I played sports since, I don't want to say I was, ooh, I started T-ball maybe 4 years old, 5 years old, T-ball, and from then on it went to football, basketball. I did a little bit of track here and there, but yeah, I did a lot of community sports while growing up, and that was where I got most of my neighborhood experiences, meeting other people that I didn't go to school with, and I remember wanting to play football. And I don't think it had anything to do with who my grandfather was. My grandfather, J.D. Garrett, he was a NFL football player for the Boston Patriots, and very known in my city, very known in my city for just his contribution to the city, all the great things that he's accomplished, everything that he's done. Yeah, I don't think that's why I wanted to play football, but I will say that when I started to play, and he was still alive at the time, so he would be out there sometimes while I'd be practicing with the city football team, and I just remember being kind of a lot of pressure for me to be good, just because of who my grandfather was, and it did motivate me. It motivated me because I know that where I come from is greatness. So that whatever I put my mind to, I can accomplish it if I just believe. And with my grandpa being the biggest example, going to the heights of the NFL, having to do the groundwork of playing in high school and playing in college, then to going to the top of his game at the NFL, that was motivation for me, so not to discredit, anything that my grandfather did, but I just knew that just because of where I came from, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's my calling, that's my passion, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and that was a that's a blurry time for me. That's a blurry time for me just because of I don't really remember. Um, I remember them being together, but I remember them being more apart than I do together. And the memories that I do have them together are not the best. Not even as far as just like horrible memories, or anything like that. But I just remember the last moment of, my parents' marriage. I felt like it had something to do with me, and that's just how I felt at the time. Like, I felt like that it was something that I had done or something that I wasn't doing, for, or just, picking sides, to where it left my parents no choice but to have to, split up. But as I got older, that wasn't the case. But as I was younger, that was something that I thought about, and I never really talked about it before. I never really discussed it, but it is something that I thought of, and even just like towards their in the middle of their divorce and everything, it was just so it was so challenging. It was so challenging just because of I always had this idea of two parents, in my household, having a mom and dad there, and my sister here as well. Just that idea of family lifestyle, and I was happy to have that for the moments that I did have, but when it went away, it was just more so like, okay. And it wasn't even like it was just so different for me because my dad and my mom still both play very very pivotal roles in my life. I'm grateful to them for whatever issues they had together. They put that to the side to raise their child, and I'm grateful for that. But in those moments, I just remember it being just like definitely different for me to have to adjust. As I said, I play sports, so for them to have to come to my games, sitting in different areas, and still supporting me, but just separate, that was something I had to get used to, or my dad coming around, but not necessarily coming in the house, or just things like that, and as a child, you're going through it, but you're not necessarily like talking about it. You're not necessarily. I don't remember doing any type of counseling, and it wasn't even like it just affected me like so much. Like I said, because they both remained in my life. Doing things in my life and just supporting me in general. But I will say that when it came towards high school, um, I feel like I got a little bit more understanding of just because they're not together doesn't mean they don't love me. That doesn't mean they don't love each other. That they just weren't meant for each other. But I think a lot of that had to do with me not just being aware to everything that transpired within their marriage, and that's perfectly fine. I feel like as a child there are certain things that you're supposed to be exposed to, and certain things you're not. My family has protected me since birth, so with protecting me since birth, that means still protecting me and even protecting me then, without letting me know everything and making me feel like everything was still good and everything was okay, even though in the back of my mind I low-key knew something was up. They did a good job of just making sure that the things that I knew were things that I was supposed to know, and anything else that I didn't have to know or didn't need to know, then hey, they didn't let me know. And I definitely respect it about them, and even to this day, like I said with the protecting thing, my family still looks at me as a child. I feel like, just because I am still currently in my hometown, I still am, living with my mom. I still am, basically living the same life I've always lived these 23 years, and so how can they look at me any different without any change? I've definitely, of course, grown up. I've got my college degree. I've done big grown up things, but until I make that step, I don't think they're gonna really look at me as an adult, you know, and that's just how I feel. And I think that's just that protective thing. Like they just want to be able to protect me and keep me and not have anything come or harm me, you know. And I love that about my family. I feel like my family is such a caring family, you know, that they have instilled that within me to care for people, to care about people, you know, to put yourself first, you know, but also think about other people as well whenever you're making your decisions or making actions. There are parts of my childhood that maybe looked at as negative to some people, but I feel like that growing up for me wasn't that bad. I really feel like it wasn't that bad. Everything that I have went through as far as a child to where I am now has made me into who I am. And that's what I want to get on here and tell you guys, you know, that no matter your situation growing up, no matter who you were raised by, how you were raised, it doesn't necessarily mean that's who you are. You know, a lot of us have been through things during our childhood. A lot of us have had to be hurt by people that we loved, you know, that we never expected to be hurt by. But I'm here to tell y'all that you have to forgive those people. You have to let go of those situations that you've been through in order to become the best new adult that you can be. You know, there's no way that you're going to be able to accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish and become who you are called to be until you deal with those childhood traumas and deal with the people that have hurt you in the past during your adolescent and childhood stages. Like I say, if we are able to deal with the things that we have been through in our childhood, deal with the people who have hurt us during our childhood, then we can move forward becoming the best adult possible, becoming new people. It's all about growth, you know, and I feel like as adults, as people, you should want to grow. You should never want to stay stagnant. You should never want to, you know, be who you were 10 years ago, you know, or still having the same habits you had when you were a child. So if there have been things in your childhood that weren't so great, you know, if there have been things in your childhood that were great, you know, um, all of it has molded you into the person that you are today. And if you choose not to uncover, you know, some of those childhood events and things that you went through, then that's on you. But just know that everything that you have been through is going to stick with you. You know, you have to talk about it to get through it. You know, you have to address it in order to remove it from your life. You know, and that's something that we don't like to do, but we have to do it. You know, it's called maturing so that we can become the best version of ourselves as possible. If you don't want to become the best version of yourself as possible, then sure, great, then don't. You know, don't uncover it. You know, leave it there. But if you do want to grow, if you do want to blossom, you have to uncover some of those bruises and get to healing them. So I think that's all for you guys today. I thank y'all again for tuning in to episode 17 of We're the New Adults. You can catch this episode on my YouTube at We're the New Adults. I do also have my podcast on Apple Music Podcast at We're the New Adults. You can follow my Instagram at We're the New Adults and my main page at tj.prodigy. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.